Racing isn't easy, but experiencing it is. iRacing puts you in the driver's seat with the industry's leading sim racing game. Drive on laser scan replicas of the greatest racing circuits from around the world. Go head-to-head against other drivers chosen by skill-based matchmaking to ensure competitive racing at every level. Compete across all your favorite series. In officially licensed cars, engineered to deliver the most accurate driving experience possible. Join a race or host your own with players from across the globe. Race against the computer or in a league with friends. Feel the thrill behind the wheel. Visit iRacing.com.
Last week, in the shadow of the Gateway Arch, the battle in the INDYCAR Buttkicker iRacing Pro Series drew even closer. 3 races left, 3 drivers to battle it out, with 6 points splitting them. And the final road course race takes us to the Monterey Peninsula and to the WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca. And so welcome along to round 8 of the INDYCAR Buttkicker iRacing Pro Series. And we're delighted to have your company once more. Our junior Kanky Party joined alongside by Kenneth Bueno. And Kenneth, we've had 4 road course races so far. One final little battle for us to enjoy, but after this, let's not forget Milwaukee and Nashville to decide our championship. It really is going to be interesting how the road course aces battle out here today.
And let's not forget, Arjuna, the storyline going into this race, the championship 3, as we'll call it. They are separated only by 6 points going into this race. So in these final 3, with Laguna Seca being the final road course race, any of these events can make or break a driver's chances of winning the championship this season. So all eyes on who can perform the best on this final road course, a classic one here in North America.
I like it. Championship 3, and we don't need to necessarily forget there are still some others to take our focus on as well. Let's take a look at the highlights from a week ago, though, when we made our way to the Worldwide Technology Raceway. A clean start for the most part, but then as the intensity built up, it built up to our first caution. Jacob Osa's slow roll out of turn 2. Jason Brophy nowhere to go. 1, 2, 3, 4 collected. Brendan Lichtenberg slides his way on through and avoids all the chaos, but more drivers found themselves getting tangled up in incidents.
You know, Arjuna, was one of the more treacherous oval races of the season apart from Indianapolis, but much like Iowa, opened up to a ton of the strategy calls between different teams. Coana going on different strategies from a yellow that came on early in the race. Plenty of guys having to carve and weave their way through the field, almost contact with some. Red line trying to fight the private label team hype machines of Malechka and Phil Kraus. And it seems like the trend continues the same way, Arjuna. Private label team hype find their way to the front at the end of these races and put themselves in the right spot.
And it's always interesting, given that strategy is is dynamic, it's fluid with the addition of the safety cars on the ovals. And so drivers coming down to pit lane, it's a difficult decision when to try and make that call. And so remember, the Apex Racing team, they slightly misjudged it at Iowa for Luke McEwen down on pit lane with one of the red line contingents, that number 21 machine of Gustavo Ariel, unfortunately getting mixed up. And then towards the very tail end of the race, a season of woe for Michele Costantini just continues to experience the struggles, all as Phil Kraus, second win of the season, and behind Eduardo Leo becomes just the second repeat winner. And of course, the championship is up for grabs. 40 laps on deck tonight. 2 more ovals to come. And I guess one thing that, Kenneth, we haven't talked about since really the start of the season, the fans had their say. They voted for where we're going for round 9 to make sure it's 50-50 road courses and ovals.
And they had a good option of road courses on that poll when it was up before the beginning of the season, but they chose Milwaukee as the oval to make it an even split, and here's where the championship lies. I mentioned those 3 at the top: Jogo Pinto, Phil Kraus, and Eduardo Leo, separated by only 6 points. That big win by Kraus at Gateway just 1 week ago surged him in the standings, while Cooper Webster has missed some. He's fallen off the charts quite a little bit. It's now Redline versus private label Team Hype, and with the razor thin margin we have, Arjuna, any race, like I said, can make a big time impact, even for guys like Gustavo Ariel back and forth.
Let's not forget the cut line as well. 1 point between that top 12 to keep their licenses for 2025. We'll talk about that through the course of these remaining 3 races as well. This WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca, though, it's fascinating. And Kenneth, talk us through the challenges of this track carved into the Monterey Hills.
Well, the challenge is the heat, number 1, but number 2, it's the 180 feet of elevation change. This one will have a lot for the drivers in terms of over hills, over crests, going down into the valleys. This track opened back in 1957, has 11 distinct turns, lots of them based on momentum, as I was hearing from some of the input from the drivers as they were getting their laps down in practice. This track clocks in at 2.238 miles, a little over 3.6 kilometers. This is also the first series race at this track. No qualifying race to piggyback off of and take notes. This is a fresh blank start right now.
It's an interesting track, and of course, so much IndyCar history here, including the pass. Everyone talks about the corkscrew, though, the corner before it, the straight left-hand climb out of turn 6. That's the one that will really challenge and frustrate drivers that miss it and run off into the gravel and slide themselves down the running order. Final road course race of the season, though, and the final road course qualifying of the season in the books. And so, let's head down trackside here on the west coast of the U.S. We made our way to the Monterey Peninsula, and from the WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca, Drago Racing and Jose Soria punch their way to the front. Jose Soria's missed a whole bunch of rounds this season, doesn't miss in qualifying today. Michael Romanidis locks up another impressive effort in qualifying to be 300ths off of pole position with his teammate Jordan Caruso inside of the points leader, Diogo Pinto. Florian Labigra shares row 3 with Ricardo Rico, who was feisty back at Gateway. David Toth and Michele Costantini share row 4 with Drago fighting in qualifying. Luke McEwen and Sam Coytert share the 5th row of the starting grid with Eduardo Leo down in the inside of row number 6. Some work to do for him in that team red line number 17. Michael Johnny is going to roll to his outside in the Coanda Esports entry. That's 4 of those Coanda cars inside of the front 12, with Peter Berryman having to fight his way forward alongside championship contender Phil Kraus. Gustavo Ariel, Dan Amor back in the field on row 8. Xavi Rose, who's going to go rallying this coming weekend in the real world, hoping not to be rallying down through the corkscrew in the gravel. He's got Elliot Veyron for company on row number 9. And we're not that far off in terms of time through these drivers. About half a second or so to find Sotomuto and Jaden Munoz, the pair of Williams Esports drivers, and then Josh Chin and Adam Crane on row number 11. UC Katia and Jeff Drake line up alongside one another toward the tail end of the field, with Rob Malechka, Brendan Lichtenberg, final drivers with qualifying times. Tamas Shimon, Jacob Oster, and Jason Brophy ready to rumble from the back. Brendan Lichtenberg and Jason Brophy, let's not forget, they've got their own little battle about not finishing at the very tail end of the field on the road courses to be settled here today. We've got a full pace lap to work our way through, so plenty of time to build and to get ready to go. But Kenneth, talk us through the weather conditions here in Laguna Seca.
Well, it seems like it's one of the hottest track temperatures we've seen on a road course this season. That's because we're in the middle of California in Monterey. So obviously you're going to have the desert sun and on the West Coast beaming down on the drivers and on the track surface. The wind is clocking at about 9 to 10 miles an hour. So, you know, there could be some handling differences there. But apart from that, it is a gorgeous day in sim to go racing. It's something that the drivers will look after over the course of the event. Also, with the track temperature, those rear tires lighting up often at Mid-Ohio, another road course race that we entered this season. Arjuna, we had plenty of guys struggle with the rear tires over the course of the run, but the primaries and the alternates on tap and on display in this race will mean a lot. Who can get the best tire wear over the course of the run and survive, sustain, and last for the win.
We're only about 7 miles off the coast, so maybe not a surprise to see the wind maybe picking up through the course of the race. We'll keep that in mind. And don't forget, we do have the 2 compounds of tires, the primaries and the alternates. Quite interesting to see that. The top 3 all electing to start on the primary compound of tires. Slightly slower, but more durable. It will last you deeper into the race. The likes of Diogo Pinto, Florian Lebiga trying to carve their way through on the alternates. They're going to have to get their elbows out early and fight their way on forward. But this is what we've loved about these road courses so far, Kenneth. We've had a pretty even split between the strategies, and we've never really known which one is the best until we get to the very end.
You're right, and as we look at the top 10 on the starting grid, it's half and half for those on the primary tires and those on the alternate tires. It's a healthy mix between those two, so you're looking at possibly great amounts of strategy calls between all those. And here is where you start to make the haymakers, right? If you're any of those teams, we'll look at our butt kicker race analysis from Laguna Seca, also known in English as Dry Lake. We go 40 laps, a little under 90 miles here in California, a bit over 144 kilometers. Like we have on the road courses all season long, no cautions. We have the tire compounds and push to pass. Who can use it the best to get a shot at the championship or to keep their eligibility alive?
That's a lot of push to pass to use as well, and so we'll send the pace car off and away. And the field's left in control of Jose Soria. The championship is all up for grabs, but there's some drivers at the front and fighting for glory, wanting to reach victory lane. Punch the throttle, let's go racing. Diogo Pinto's not hanging around. Racing from the WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca, and already Team Redline trying to charge their way forward on those alternate compound of tires. They're 3 wide behind, a bold send down the inside from one more of the Redline contingent, really making hay while the sun is shining. But up front, Soria, Caruso, holding off the challenge from Pinto for the time being as we get ready to begin the climb up towards turn number 6.
And off of that Andretti hairpin, which is turn 2 here at Laguna Seca, guys like Luke McEwen and several others were going 3 wide in the middle of the corner in the attempt to hard brake and beat all the drivers on the in or outside entering the corner. But here, big crash. One car is flying up and over. That is Elliot Veyron, Jeff Drake, Dan Amor. Triple cars involved in all of that. UC Katia might have gotten a piece of that as well. But a monumental crash on lap 1.
It was Dan Amor, the Apex Racing Academy car, going up and over. Not what you want to see on the opening lap. Did happen further back in the field, and so we'll take a look at the replay when we can. But the end of the opening lap, Pinto, Lebigra, they've made their way forward 2 positions each to sit behind your race leader, Jose Soria, who will lead at the end of the opening lap. But I think you can mark my words, take this to around lap 3 or 4, and he's sitting behind these Redline drivers and trying to hold on to their coattails as they'll try and break away at the front of this field. It's a short race as well, let's not forget. 40 laps, maybe 50 odd minutes of racing. It's going to be a real sprint for these drivers. Pinto really trying to charge as we get ready to climb once again.
And for Soria here, who started this race on the front row, on the pole position, he's looking to stay up here as long as he can. We talk about haymakers. He is almost second to last in the point standings, so he will probably not be in this series next season. But for Soria here, who will look to requalify hopefully next year, I mean, he's going to try and do whatever he can to get at least 1 win before this is all said and done. But he's got the Redline sea of cars right behind him. We'll take a second look at what went down. It was off of the uphill corner, turn 5 up to turn 6. where it appears that several cars had gotten sideways. They made contact. It was Phil Kraus who got into one of the Coanda machines and Elliot Veyron, and there's Dan Amor, that green and black number 41, just sailing over the air, up and over. In real life, that would be a hellacious crash, and it's the same in the sim. Here's a look from Oster, back in a couple rows deep, seeing what was going on.
Yeah, and I think the main thing is you saw UC Catty actually slide underneath Dan Amor. Kraus knew that he had to be physical, right? He couldn't afford to slide too far back. We've been talking about this race, Kenneth, as damage limitation for him. So we're redrawing the live pictures. Diogo Pinto's taken over the race lead. Jose Soria under fire as Florian Labigra punches his way up the inside. Slots back into line down through turn 6 because that's not a passing opportunity. But this is exactly what Team Redline wanted to see. The pressure build up onto Kraus and their points leader starting to break away up front.
And they're loving to see the fact that Phil Kraus almost had a hand in that incident, and he is mired back in 18th place. So it will be really tough at this narrow track of Laguna Seca to make passes across the board. It'll take a lot of strategy calls to do so, but Labigra is biding his time, knowing he's knocking on the door. Labigra is the lowest running Redline car in the standings. He'll peek to the inside, down the front straightaway, into turn 1, and now turn 2, hard on the braking zone. Labigra, easy work on the primary, the alternate tires rather. Labigra to second place.
And so we'll see what he can do now to try and close what is a 1.5 second deficit to his teammate at the front. There is Phil Kraus. Did start on the alternate, or rather on the primary compound, will switch to the alternates later in the race. He's only lost 4 positions, and the side pod, the left side of that car, looking still factory condition. So, I mean, despite what was a pretty crazy opening, those in his ear, Adam Blocker, Alexander Van der Sant in the crew positions, going to be trying to calm him down and just work him through this next portion of the race. So it's Redline 1 and 2, Drago 3 and 4, and then Coanda 5 and 6 running themselves down the hill through Rainy Curve once more. And we mentioned at the start of this race, 200 seconds of push to pass to run through the course of the 40 laps. It adds about 60 seconds, 60 horsepower, I should say, to your engine output.
And you've got some of those drivers up at the front that have used it a lot, specifically Labigra, who's in the attempt to catch up to his teammate, while the race leader in Pinto really has stayed very conservative with it. But plenty of guys in this top 10 have already bursted at least 30 or so seconds of that, and a lot of it is creating battles inside the top 10. You look at Ricardo Rico. This is for 9th place. Michael Romanidis, who started this race in P2 of all places. Very solid qualifying effort for the Coanda teammates of Romanidis and Caruso, but Luke McEwen pushes by. That's for the top 10 spot. It's also allowed guys like Sam Keitzer, Michele Costantini, Eduardo Leo, and the aforementioned Caruso to make moves in these several groups that are separated now.
Really good pass there from Luke McEwen. Remember, tangled up down on pit lane last week with Gustavo Ariel. So trying to now bounce back and give himself a little bit more points buffer. Championship prizes go all the way down to 15th at the end of the season. And so even though only the top 12 hold on to their license, the newly crowned FIA F4 Esports Global Champion, Luke McEwen, wants to continue adding to what has been an already successful 2024 by all accounts. You can see the fastest lap times on the left side of the screen. Diogo Pinto is flying right now. Not only is he one of the few drivers into the sixes, he's consistently as well putting gaps on the rest of the field. David Toss just passed Jose Soria. That is a compound switch. Jose Soria, the highest running of the primary compound tires. Looking rearwards though, you're just continuing to see how much, Kenneth, you've got to try and maintain track limits on this track, because it's so tempting to run a little bit wide, kick up a little bit of gravel and slow yourself down.
Yeah, but this track doesn't give you a lot of leeway to get off the track. We know that it's several others on the schedule, especially tracks like the Indianapolis Grand Prix circuit that we ran to kick off the season. Maybe a bit of Long Beach as well, or no Long Beach, but some of the other tracks have a bit more asphalt, a bit more to play with if you go off the track. But here you've got all sand, all gravel, so if you do go off the surface, you're going to be sliding all over the place. Here's Xavi Ros, who just celebrated his birthday about 3 or so days ago, so a happy belated birthday to the Spaniard Xavi Ros. He's in the fight with the Coanda esports machine of Michael Janney for 14th. A lot of this has come down to mistakes, and another proper tally on mistakes. Philip Kraus went off in turn 6 several laps ago. So everyone human here at Laguna Seca. Really tough to keep yourself on track when you've got so many momentum-reliant corners.
And so he is on the alternates. What will he do behind now, Michael Janney, on the primary compound? You expect at some point And maybe around lap 15 or so, some drivers on the alternates might think about coming down to pit lane, not anytime soon behind. Now that's Phil Kraus starting to get physical with Adam Crane. And again, a difference on compound. And Kraus, I think, loses out. Still in 18th for the time being. He's being prevented from moving his way on forward. And Crane just continuing, it would seem, to go defensive. Looked like a big lunge up the inside from Kraus, and now Crane on the push to pass. Can see illuminated in green on the left-hand side of the screen. And when drivers get onto that button, holding on for the time being. We'll take a look at the replay, I do believe. This is what happened down bottom as Phil Kraus has gotten past Adam Crane as well. Let's not forget, so that's some championship points for him. Javi Rose all the way off the track.
Yeah, it's the same part of the track where Kraus went off the circuit several laps ago. It's a really tough turn 6 because you're going so fast, and it's a really quick snap to the left where you have to arc that car and weight shift it to get the proper apex. Only problem is you go a little too wide, you're in the sand. You go a little too cut in the course, you're going to smack the curb on the inside that's colored in red, and it will launch your car in the air and get it all out of shape. So it's really a lose-lose game. The margins are really slim if you make a mistake there in turn 6. Thankfully, both drivers in Ross and Kraus are able to continue in their ways, but we'll see just how they're able to progress. Those mistakes do not help at all.
Looking at Sam Coiter on the chase behind Michele Costantini, the highest runner of the Command Esports drivers. Remember, Jordan Caruso as well as Michael Romanidis qualified up towards the front, but are on the primary compound and slipping back in the running order. Both of these drivers had a pretty miserable run at Gateway. Costantini crashed late. Sam Coiter got tangled up early and then had to serve a pit lane penalty as well. So he's trying to put that disappointment behind him, but he's run a bit deep initially into the braking zone, and you saw how he got checked up and squared up midway through the corner, delayed getting down onto the power. Costantini is going to hold on for the time being. Still, though, Jose Soria running very, very strongly up there in 4th position. A driver like we mentioned, Kenneth, he was on holiday in Asia for part of the first part of the season. So did a race from Hong Kong, did a race from Singapore, and then missed 2 rounds of the championship. He's in a really interesting position strategy-wise as we creep up to around 1/4 of this race complete.
He is, and it's obviously because he's on the primary set of tires, and as everybody else in the top 7 are running the alternate red-walled side Firestone Firehawks, this driver here in Soria has been able to stay put and stay content, even without burning that much of his push to pass. Only about 30 seconds or so he's burned over the course of the run. So as this progresses, and inevitably when the field does have to come down for the pit stop, Soria already will have a pretty significant distance to the next primary tire car in the field, which is 8th place Jordan Caruso, and that's already separated by a handful of seconds down the line. So it's good news for Soria here, who, again, like you said, just making haymakers, trying whatever he can to gain some points, maybe try and get a win here.
I was just taking a look at those push-to-pass numbers. He's also not used too much of the button, so positioning himself very nicely for the tail end of this race to really go on offense. And you are seeing a lot of those red sidewall tire, the alternate runners, really swinging heavy at the start of this race, so they're going to be struggling to defend late on. There is the point situation, though. We knew for Diogo Pinto, this was his chance to try and build up a buffer. For Phil Kraus, the opportunity to not slip too far back, because that was very close for Costantini to avoid running wide out of turn 6. 33 points is quite significant between Pinto and Eduardo Leo. But Kenneth, I'm thinking more about Phil Kraus. We know the maximum difference between 1st and 2nd in these races is 10 points. And so if Kraus goes out and wins both of those next oval races, at minimum, he's going to close 20 points on Diogo Pinto. He's going to need a little bit more than that.
And he's going to need some more assurance here tonight. The last thing you want to do is put your back against the wall in those final 2 and create a game 7 moment for yourself. Some drivers like the challenge, but a lot of others would like to preemptively cause a situation to where they're a little more comfortable, or if they're behind, the gap is manageable. Thankfully, the final 2 are ovals. That is good for Kraus, but you can't bank on it going well for you every single time, because you have to account for all of the different unpredictabilities that can catch you at any given moment. And for Kraus, who is stuck in 17th, has yet to make any progress on the primary tires in 17th. You know, it's been really tough, and he's going to need strategy in the midway portion of this race to get any sort of ground. He was able to do so in the likes of Barber and at Mid-Ohio in the last several weeks. But it's looking like the Phil Kraus performance that we've seen from Indy GP and Long Beach to kick off. Not so good. Kraus, though, needs to dig deep, find some of that inspiration, and get going.
See what he can dig out. Locks the left front momentarily with the pressure building behind from Tamas Shimonu. Gotta say, what a drive from him so far. Remember, failed to set a qualifying time. Already up 9 positions through the course of this race. We'll see what more the Hungarian can do. And, well, if you're wondering what the view is in this Dallara IR18, the push-to-pass comes alive on the dash. Well, this is what you see. This is the view that every iRacer can get. And it's right now your opportunity to join in with the biggest iRacing sale of the year. 25% off renewals of both current and expired subscriptions. New members get 50% off. There's never been a better time to jump into the iRacing world as we head off into the holiday season. Maybe a good time to give someone in your life the gift of iRacing. Jump on now and head on to iRacing.com to learn more. Kenneth, you know this. Just before we went live, I resubscribed for 2 more years.
Yeah, you did. You did. You were honest about it. Hey, I like that call. I mean, I honestly use Black Friday as most as I can to try and make some, new subscriptions. I love using iRacing as much as possible. So to renew it when you've got the discounts, and for all those that are new, I mean, iRacing continues to grow with new content every single couple of months. I mean, we have our next update in about a month or so. So we're looking at lots of updates that'll come across the scene in the next several months and going into 2025. But I'm watching this here for 18th place and 17th. Kraus, like we said, yet to make progress on the likes of Muto and Ross that are sitting 16th and 15th. But Tamas Simon has been on the push to pass and has been pressuring Kraus for the spot.
He has, and he's a driver that's been quite consistent in prior championships. He competed in the Dallara IR1 championships that we had, both in 2021 and in 2023. We'll see what he can do, finding his way back from the tail end of the field. That doesn't help when you drive wide out of turn number 4, though. Back up towards Sam Coiter. He's got Eduardo Leo, his teammate, behind. In front, Michele Costantini still, and have not made any significant inroads into Jose Soria. And in the last 4 laps or so, Soria's only dropped about 2 seconds off the tail end of Diogo Pinto, so holding very, very steady right now. And if Pinto's looking good for a race win, Jose Soria might still be looking very, very strong for a podium spot. Now that is Sam Coiter showing himself in the mirror of Michele Costantini, trying to unsettle and unnerve.
And for a guy like Michele Costantini, he needs solid runs over the last 3 if he wants to keep his license, his eligibility for this series. It's the top 12 that we're looking at, and it's razor thin between those guys. But Costantini, who's in 18th place in the standings, has 103 points in comparison to whoever's at 12. David Toth, who's in the top 3 right now with 131. So if Costantini can get a solid run tonight, could build up the amount of points to where he piggybacks off the momentum at Milwaukee and Nashville and then enters the top 12. He desperately needs that if he wants to stay in this series next year. It's a good run right now, but like we've noted in many of the other races, you probably don't want to jinx him this early on. Want to keep an eye on him, though. He sits in 5th.
And a former championship leader in this series, Cooper Webster, missing a 2nd race of the championship. We assume preparing for 10 days from now, where he'll be racing at the Macau Grand Prix. So looking very much forward to watching and cheering on for Cooper, but a driver that at one point we thought was potentially in the championship fight. We're now kind of wondering, especially if he misses the next 2 weeks and is off focusing on that real-world commitment, will he have a spot in the top 12 as Josh Chin pulls out of the way, already down a lap, not wanting to get tangled up as traffic, blue flags being flown for sure. You want to learn more about the series? Head on to iRacing.com/INDYCAR-esports. You can see the championship standings, where we've been. We've got 2 more races left after this. We're going, of course, to the oldest tracks in the world, America's legendary oval, the Milwaukee Mile. And then the final week of the championship strums our way over to the Nashville Superspeedway. 2 ovals to round out this championship campaign. One thing that I did call out, I think about 10 laps ago, Kenneth, was lap 15. The point at which theoretically some of the alternate compound tire drivers might elect to come to pit lane and switch over to the primaries.
Well, it looks like right now the answer is going to be no for entering pit road as it calls for lap 16. They're going to hope, though, that they can extend it as long as they possibly can. That's been the idea with these alternate tires. If you can keep it on the race car for as long as possible, that is the best case scenario, because as soon as you switch those primaries, you've got a lot more life in them over the second half of this race, and the last thing you want to do is have worn out tires. But the biggest proposition is for all the guys that are on the primaries right now. They'll have to go on those alternates later. Some will make the call a little too early, then they burn off the red walled side tires, and then it's all over for them. They're going to start bleeding a lot of ground. Our first pit stop with Adam Crane, who's back in 26. He's fallen a lap down. He switched to the primary white walled tires. So maybe the calling card for several of the others, but the distance, Arjuna, maybe too much for some of the drivers to think about it right now, especially if the gaps aren't closing in or gaining by that much.
Yeah, Adam Crane did have a long pit stop, so I'm pretty sure there's damage. Not the first time Javi Ross has been off the track, and a real-world rally driver, thanks to sim racing, not the type of rallycross he wants to be doing. Phil Kraus might just have been tagged by Thomas Simone. Does he have damage now to the tail end of that car? Will he get slowed in pit lane? One little moment could have big consequences. Phil Kraus not looking that stressed.
It doesn't look like Kraus has that much damage, but boy, did he escape a bullet down the corkscrew. That's one of the slowest corners here at Laguna Seca. You're going downhill, and Simone had basically shipped in the entry, went all the way down looking for the crossover, saw that it was a little too late, knew that he was going to hit Kraus the way he was going. He went back down and cut the course quite a little bit to escape harm's way. I think that Thomas Simone is also okay without any significant damage. But again, this is another danger sign for Kraus, who's stuck in the mid-pack and needs the strategy to get out of this hole, because the longer he stays around the traffic, the sketchier it's going to get.
And so really the question is, was it a hit to the effectively the rain light, for lack of a better description at this point in time? If that's pushed in slightly, it can cost you some time down in pit lane. Have to wait and see. Only time will tell. Starting to close up the front, by the way. I think the crossover point has been reached, and I wonder if Jose Soria is going to start going on the offense. He's already pulled away from Costantini and Sam Coitet as we recheck in with the fight for 5th position. Costantini trying to cover the door very late on down through the braking zone, as here comes Javi Rose. I think that's effectively forced. He went off the track one too many times. He'll get rid of his alternate tires and put on the primaries, Kenneth.
Yeah, he's going to be the first driver, at least in the mid-pack, to do so. We'll look for any of those guys in the top 10 to make the calls. But again, it's more of those guys 15th on back. That includes Kraus, that probably will pit earlier just to get the track position a little later. And for these guys here, I don't know when they're going to want to come down pit road, just because the battles continue to be rather fierce with Costantini, Kai Turden in the background there by several car lengths, Eduardo Leo down the corkscrew. This could get really close between the three of them over the next several laps. But we'll probably see Jogo Pinto stay out an extra couple laps with the gap that he has. And it seems like everyone's comfortable staying as long as they have. I'm honestly surprised, Arjuna. We've seen 18 laps, now 19 run green, and these alternate tire cars are still not looking down pit road. There's one down pit road now, and it appears to be Joshua Chin back in 25th. He's a lap down, though, so no worries.
And again, remember that pace fall off has been around a second so far, so there is definitely something to be said for those tires really working at the start of the stint, but slowly and progressively falling off. I've sent a message down to the private label team hype. We'll see if we can get some sort of a word as to whether Kraus has got some damage to that number 99, and we'll update you when we can. But I think we are very much in that pit window. We're coming up towards half race distance. Drivers starting to struggle and run off the track just a little bit more as we take a look on board. Michele Costantini being blinded by the power of 1,000 suns. Sam Coitet a little less light in the room. And of course, both of these drivers, one racing from Italy, one racing from the Netherlands, quite early in the morning for them.
Yeah, we've been talking about that over the course of the series, right? How a bulk of the drivers are from the European side of things. So a lot of them have to deal with 2, 3, 4 in the morning starts and races, to where they don't end it until the early morning hours. So a lot of them probably tired, trying to lock in as much as they can. They've done a phenomenal job, most of them have. And here come some drivers on pit road. That's one of the Coanda entries. That is in Michael Janney from the mid-pack. So another driver who's not necessarily in the top 10 coming down pit road. Only thing is, he's the solo car down. We're not seeing groups come in so far.
We missed him last week, did not compete at the WeatherTech Worldwide Technology Raceway. Good to see him back here at the WeatherTech Raceway, Laguna, Seca, but wonder what's going to happen. There was another INDYCAR going slow. I think that's Elliot Veyron, who's just trying to stay out of the way. He is 11 laps down. Dan Amor, Jeff Drake are sitting in pit lane, but we do still have 27 cars running, of which 3 are a lap down. So there is traffic to speak of. Jason Brophy, Brendan Lichtenberg in their fight to not be last between the two of them. There's 1 second splitting them. See if they start to battle in the closing stages. This is interesting though. Right on half race distance, Drago decide in synchrony to pit. And Kenneth, one driver is going to take on the alternate tires, one driver is going to take on the primaries.
Yeah, this is a split strategy between those two. They didn't elect to go the same way like a lot of the other bigger teams do, where lots of them stay on the same strategy and just play with each other in coordination. But Drago Racing there going the opposite way, seeing what works the best. And for Toth there, he had burned up a ton of his push to pass system. He only has about 81 seconds left, so he's got to really be careful in these final 20 to save as much as he can. For Soria here, this is good news. It's going to be a good situation for him on the tires that he's got now. But I mean, you can go 20 laps, it seems like, on the alternate, so I'd say that he's probably confident in what he can exactly do, and he's got mostly clear track, so I'd say that's good news for them as the field comes by. And here comes the race leader. Diogo Pinto is in. Florian Labigro will follow. Michele Costantini sits in third, waiting to see his decision. He'll stay out, so he'll wait the extra lap. He'll take the race lead, and Pinto is in this time.
A bit wide there from Sam Koiter, who now lights up onto the pusher bus. But if you're Pinto and Labigro, you've got to cover off Soria, because he can gain as much as a second a lap on the undercut with his alternate compound tires. So that's what they're thinking about. These drivers have got their own strategies and battles to think about. Slightly different ballpark for them about where they're going to be leaving pit lane. The race often away from pit lane though. I wonder how close it might be for Diogo Pinto. Is he going to get some clean air? Is he going to be spat out into some traffic? I think he's already got a pretty comfortable margin to Labigro, Toth and Soria. And indeed, yes he is. You can see he's come out just in front on the left side of the screen of Phil Kraus.
Yeah, he's got in front of Phil Kraus, which will mean a lot because Kraus still has to make that pit stop. He's been out on those primary tires, so as soon as he goes on the alternates, he's going to drop a ton more track position, and he's going to have to be really aggressive fighting through the pack, which will only allow Pinto to extend a championship gap if it holds serve. Michele Costantini will stay out, but here come the red line machines. Keizer and Leo, both of these guys on the alternate tires. They'll switch to the white-walled primaries, and I don't know, this seems to be a risky call for Costantini. Another why not moment for the Italian, saying I can stay a little bit longer with these red wall tires. I'll go on the primary tires a little bit later when there's less laps to go.
And this will allow him, he's at this point, the primaries aren't falling off. Michele's best lap is only 0.3 slower than what he did last lap, so he's not losing time. This also means you'll have less fall off on the maybe tires that he'll have later on. This has been a quite consistent run from him. Has not necessarily taken too much out of the tire early on. I'm just very curious about how they played this one out, maybe contrary to how some would have thought about running the softer compounded tire down through the corkscrew. 6 stories is the elevation change, and it's one thing to see it on iRacing, it's another to see the steepness, the elevation plunge in person. The one thing that all people will tell me though that I've talked to who have raced around here in the sim in the real world, the only way to make your way through the corkscrew efficiently is to spot a turn-in point, and there's a tree that you see both in the sim and the real world. Just got to make sure you keep your eyes on it. Here comes Jordan Caruso down to pit lane.
Yeah, Caruso is in from second. His teammate Costantini will stay out. So again, the other Coenda teammate of Costantini will continue his reign at the front of the field while Caruso comes in. And you're right about the elevation change, and that is a setup challenge for a lot of these teams. We've mentioned a ton of the tracks don't necessarily categorize themselves as heavy elevation change circuits other than a mid-Ohio, maybe a bit of a Barber there, but you're looking at Long Beach, Indy GP tracks that are, for the most part, are pretty flat. You're not going up and down all that much, but when you're setting up for corners like the corkscrew, the car can bottom out so easily down this hill and over the crest, can easily light up, and you can not get the air from underneath the race car. and you lose a ton of downforce. So I was watching Peter Berryman's lap hours before we went green tonight from Laguna Seca as Costantini comes in, and he mentioned the corkscrew. It just pile drives there into the corner, and you sort of feels like a hoverboard as you're going over the curves because the car catches that much air, and you got to be really careful about where you hit your marks on the racetrack. Gustavo Ariel also is in as well from second place.
Watching Michele as well, you see just how difficult that pit entry is. Remember, there was an incident a couple of years ago where poor Romain Grosjean crashed a Honda Civic on pit entry. Not even an INDYCAR, a Honda Civic. Here comes Diogo Pinto coming down into the Andretti hairpin, and I tell you what, he's built up such a monumental buffer. It's not even close. 5 seconds the margin back to his teammate Florian Lebigra, who has still got David Toth and Jose Soria behind in the coattails. Rob Malechka is going to dive down to pit lane as the pit stop takers just continue to sequence their way on in. As it sits right now, 15 laps to go at the line for Diogo Pinto to hold on to what would be his first win this season, and bouncing back after Kenneth last week at Gateway, he finished outside the top 10 for the very first time. Tamer Shimon gets in front of Phil Kraus out of pit lane.
A beautiful move by Shimon there, who had been planning that pass for, it feels like, the entire race, right? He was right behind Phil Kraus. They had that slight almost entanglement there through the corkscrew, but now it's on to Kraus to take on this challenge. But he is probably looking at the top of the board and saying, oh my, I've got a lot of work to do with these next 2 races that are on the ovals, because Diogo Pinto has been so stellar all night long. And you're right, 14th place at Gateway was his worst finish of the season, and prior to that, he had been the only driver in the entire field to finish every single race in the top 10. It's surely a feat. It shows his consistency, how good he is. There's Shimon and Kraus left and right side of your screen, and that battle for 16th still going on.
Yeah, and when Diogo Pinto, this is something I think we've talked about a little bit, but when he won the Porsche Esports Super Cup in 2022, he only actually won 1 race. The thing that took him to the championship was, guess what? Only finishing outside the top 10 once in that season as well. And he got dubbed with the nickname Captain Consistent, and with very, very good reason. And I tell you what, he's living up to that reputation once again, and he just found a groove. Even if Redline came into this championship knowing the ovals may be where they wouldn't be as strong, they'd have a bit of a deficit. For the most part at Gateway, we did see they nailed it in qualifying. They seemingly had a bit more race speed as well. They aren't going to be the ones to be sitting back come the next 2 rounds of this championship. They will still be looking to go on offense. Love this perspective that we got to see for a second there, by the way, because 2 completely different ways to experience and enjoy iRacing. VR and regular monitors and stuff. Kenneth, do you enjoy VR? Do you enjoy being sucked into the cars here on iRacing?
Well, first of all, regular monitors and stuff. I've never heard anyone describe it that way, but I honestly have tried both. But I'm a monitor guy. I'm going to stick to the classics, right? I've tried VR. As someone who wears glasses, it's really tough on my head after a couple hours of racing. It's a really cool perspective, but I'm good with the monitor. I'm good with being able to toggle where I can view a little bit instead of having to turn my neck everywhere. I don't know, just more of a monitor guy. I've been used to it. What about you?
I've tried VR. I've got a monitor sitting behind me. The reality is I don't sim race much anymore, but don't forget, iRacing.com, new memberships are 50% off. Renewals for both active and expired subscriptions are 25% off. So biggest sale of the year for iRacing. Never a better time to jump in or jump back in to the official racing scene. That's going to be a lunge up the inside from Ricardo Rico. Now, is he going to get followed through from Jordan Caruso? No, because I think just in the nick of time, Sam Coytett blocked off. Brendan Lichtenberg some lap traffic as well, and a big old smile from the Australian as he runs down to turn number 1, with Rico going very, very defensive and trying to force Coytett to go the long way around.
Not sure if that was a smile of excitement or nervous laughter there as they almost tangled up there off the final corner, turn 11. But for Caruso here, we were mentioning Michele Costantini trying to dig his way out of the point standings for eligibility. Jordan Caruso is 2 spots off of that cut line, but what we're seeing here is with the mix of strategy, it's created the most congested line of cars that we've seen all race long, and a lot of that has come down to who has pit when. Look at guys like Luke McEwen. He'll fight his way to the inside for the corkscrew in 8th place. These are two of the drivers on the alternate tires. Caruso just got bumped off the circuit. He'll lose about 2 off the corner. That's a nightmare there for Caruso as McEwen makes one move, and it's just collateral damage from there.
And that was Jordan Caruso, by the way, as Jason Brophy tries to avoid getting railroaded by the traffic that's coming through. He's going to run off the track, pick up what will be one off track incident point as a result of that. I know some people in chat have been wondering about track limits, but it seems for the most part these drivers know what they can get away with, and 2 wheels on the track seems to be the boundary. But Jordan Caruso racing from the OG Coanda facility. So, of course, Coanda Esports were the very first sim racing team to have their own facility where drivers lived and raced all together. They have now an even bigger facility. Jordan Caruso is racing from home. Lunge up the inside from Luke McEwen. Sam Coytek can't fight back. He doesn't have the tires underneath him. And so there goes the alternates through up to 7th spot.
And we talk about how the tire wear hasn't really mattered that much, specifically with the alternate tires. Not a lot of fall off here at Laguna Seca in comparison to what we've seen at all the other road courses on this schedule, which certainly is a surprise considering it's the last road course race of this season. But for McEwen there, when you look at the alternate tires, just how much you can get, especially in these opening laps. Seems like, though, they're less of a fall off and more of a plateau here at Laguna Seca, so McEwen is just using all that he can, and he's got a lot of ground to gain for Ricardo Rico up the road in P6. But great run by McEwen here, who's looking for his first top 10 since his win at Barber. It's been a little while. He's finished the last 3 outside of the top 10, 1 top 15 finish at Gateway, so looking for a rebound tonight.
Sam Coytek loses another spot and then runs off the track even more. Eduardo Leo, his teammate, is the one that slips on through. And we did mention this a couple of weeks ago, but Eduardo Leo, Michael Romanidis, and Gustavo Ariel next Thursday won't be racing from home, be that in Brazil or in Europe. Instead, some of these drivers in contention, let's not forget, top 10 in the championship, find themselves heading to the New Orleans Motorsports Park to kick off their real racing careers for the first round of the Prodigy 3 Championship. Both Gustavo and Eduardo will be teammates racing for Real Madrid goalkeeper Thibaut Courtois Racing. Going to be very, very interesting to see how they get on in the Radical SR1s that they'll be competing in. But Kenneth, they're not going to be racing in their rigs. Instead, they're going to be racing with limited practice time, maybe at a track they've got limited experience in as well, let's not forget, from the New Orleans Motorsports Park. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they all get on.
Yeah, and the biggest challenge for the guys as they go into those final 2 races is obviously the fact that their ovals and Redline has historically been known over this series not to be the greatest on that type of track. They're still taking notes and learning as much as they can over the course of this 2024 season, but you're also looking at, the time you're putting into practice. As Jordan Caruso seems to have encountered some sort of trouble, Arjuna. He's on pit road.
Not quite sure what's happened here, to be honest. Now, is this something that's just stymied from a little bit of contact and resulted in the car not being as drivable as it should be, or is there more to the story than we know? He's been stationary for an awfully long amount of time and now has pulled the car out of the pit box itself. So I think that is day done for, well, a former Porsche Esports champion. We'll go back and take a look at the replay. Our great production team, as ever, right on the case, figuring out what's happening. And, well, what do we say plenty on these broadcasts? What's rule number 1 of racing? Don't hit your teammate, and that's a rather uncomfortable moment with Michael Romanidis down through the corkscrew. Already looks like that Coanda car is not looking great.
Yeah, it looks like just minimal contact there, but that's well more than enough to get him out of shape. And we almost saw Thomas Simon, Phil Krause get in that exact same scenario at the entry of what is the corkscrew, classically turn 8. But for those guys, just minimal contact, and that is really tough for Caruso. Like I said, trying to escape the eligibility cut line deficit that he faced going into tonight, which, as we were looking at it, is a total of about 8 points or so. Not a lot when you're looking at the grand scheme of things. So Caruso falling out of the order this late in the going with 9 laps to go. That's a huge shunt mentally, and he's going to have to lock in the next 2 if he wants to get back in this series next year.
See, again, send the word down on pit lane, see if we can get a clue as to what happened. Do think, by the way, for Phil Kraus, there was no damage to the rear end of his car after the contact with Xavi Rose, so just something to keep in mind. He's still down in 15th, has not been the easiest day for him. And straight away, Coanda getting back to me. A little bit of front wing damage, Kenneth, and straight away pulling Caruso back to the box.
No, I'm a little bit surprised, though, because if it's minimal front wing damage, you know, it's not going to affect the car that much. You will be affected handling wise. The car won't really be dialed in the corners, especially through the high speed ones here, but it just appears that you can spend your time down pit road, get it fixed, and you'll be fine for the most part. You'll just lose a lot of that track position. So I'm just honestly surprised that Caruso decided to exit the race with that minimal damage, as we're watching a huge battle here. Peter Berryman is on fire, trying to get to the outside of Sam Kiter for P10.
Channel the spirit of Alex Zanardi and move your way forward into the top 10. That is a contender for move of the season from Peter Berryman. Michael Romanidis also on the alternate tires can now try and force his way through as well. Koitet's bleeding positions from 10th to 12th. The Greek driver is going to squeeze his way on through. Yes, Koitet drives off the track and gets the power down, but that is now both those cars on the alternate tire working their way on forward. Kenneth, that's why this track is so loved.
And that's why the strategy has become so interesting, because the fact that the alternate tires didn't fall off so much in that front run, and maybe allowed all those guys who started on the alternate tires to second guess themselves a little bit, thinking, well, we could have gone on the primary tire to begin, and with the lack of fall off and plateau from the red wall tires late in the race, why couldn't have we done that strategy first? And Kiter is just wondering what's going on as the gap in front continues to balloon. It's now almost 7/10 of a second between Romanidis and Kiter back there for 11th place, and Berryman is starting to pull away from the 53 as well. So it is a big time strategy call missed there for a lot of those who started on those alternate tires first, thinking they could have the advantage. Turns out not the case.
So push to pass numbers on the left side of the screen. Jose Soria has closed up to the back of Florian Labigra and has got a good 50-second advantage with 6 laps left to go. So that's 10 extra seconds of push to pass with which to work. We'll see if he's still got some grip in the alternate compound tires after splitting this race effectively in 2, pitting at the end of lap 20 and asking the red sidewall tires to go another 20 laps after that. His teammate Riccardo Rico's trying to chase down Michele Costantini as well, but Costantini's got a bit more push to pass in reserve. And late in this race, given that we have seen some drivers risking it with track limits and maybe racking up some incident points, they're going to have to be careful. They can't afford to continue driving off the track.
They cannot. I was about to mention that, the fact that these guys are getting their left and right side tires just barely on the sand, but if you eke out a little bit closer or a little bit far off the track, then you're going to end up with that off-track penalty. So these guys are going to be tiptoeing across the circuit in the final 6. That could mean that championship standings will be won and lost if you're looking at the off-track penalties. We're looking at David Top right now for Drago Racing, the Hungarian. I'd say, Arjuna, this is an impressive run for Top. He's been building this up over the last 2 or so races, it feels like. Got the podium, his first of the season at Gateway last week, and if he's going to get this one tonight, it'll be an on-par, great average finish over the last 2. If he's able to get 4th, he's only had 2 top 10s prior to the podium at Gateway. So for Todd, I mean, this is resurgence in the final 3. Not enough for the championship, but that could be the surviving note to get him above the cut line and keep him in this series.
And a driver that came into this with, I think, a bit of expectation, wanted to try and bounce or continue to deliver after the performance in the 2023 Turn Racing Grand Prix iRacing Series. 3 second-place finishes on his way to 2nd in the championship, and continuing to just build himself up on the ovals as well. A little bit further back, though, those drivers that already have enough speed, I think is maybe the way to say it, on the ovals, but maybe struggle a bit more on the road courses. Brendan Lichtenberg and Jason Brophy, their battle to not be last between the 2 of them. Now, there's contention as to whether it's 2-2, 3-1 going into this final one, final road course, I should say, of the season. However, I'm going to claim it's 2-2, and so right now there are 1.8 seconds splitting to veterans of the iRacing community in this IndyCar. And Kenneth, It's all up for grabs. Who is the least bad on the road courses?
Well, you know, we always say there's a race in a race, right? You obviously have the race for the win. You have the race for the championship. Sometimes it's the race for the cut line like we're talking about over the last several races. And then there's this. I'd say that if you've had a struggle of a season, why not? Try to create some more competition. Get you motivated to run these last several. Not only because you're going to have a lot of fun doing that, but you're going to do it between yourself and friends that you know, that you've raced with for years on the iRacing service. So, I mean, give credit to them. They've had a really rough season, both of them, for the most part, beneath the top 20 in standings, almost the top 25. But if they can create that little rivalry between them on who can finish last the least, that's it's a lot of fun. But Profiets, it has the advantage on those alternate tires right now in 22nd, and the time is dwindling, so Lichtenberg doesn't have a lot left in the tank if he wants to make a move on.
I mean, this is what it's all about, Ryan. This is something Brian Till, former IndyCar driver, I've talked to him about this, but you'll get to a race weekend, and you may only be the 5th best driver or car at that event. And so if you win the race, great, you performed above the expectation. If you finish down in 10th, well, you've under-delivered. You need to figure out where you went wrong. If you finish in 5th, you've been able to extract the expected performance. Maybe you'll be looking for more, but you should be happy at the end of the day that you performed to the ability of the car. Not sure Phil Kraus, that is, in that private label team hype entry, is going to be thrilled about this. He's still got a chance to grab maybe a couple more points and positions, nestled behind Michael Jani and Sam Coitet. But time's running out. We're going to have 2 laps to go at the line, and 41 points will split Kraus from the championship lead if things stay as they are.
And it is not going to be fun if you continue to roller coaster in the point standings. And as you were talking about it, I guess that Kraus is just one spot off of being the expected performance, as he started 14th in this race from Laguna Seca. But he was only 3, mind you, right before this race. 3 singular points. I can count that on my fingers. Now it's 41. He's got 2 oval races left to do it, but I mean, it's really tough when you've got Diogo Pinto standing out the way he is tonight. That's the last thing that Kraus wanted, especially after Pinto hasn't been able to win a singular race on the campaign. Good news is traffic in front. Michael Jani and Simon Kiter, both of them who have bled a bit of time over the last several laps, could give Kraus the opportunity. Just saying no, it won't be easy for Kraus to make the move.
And I think partially why that gap has extended up to Diogo Pinto so drastically. Let's not forget there are bonus points for leading laps and leading the most laps, of which Pinto is of course going to take both of them. And as he comes across to start what will be the final lap of this race, he's only got 2.3 odd miles left to navigate his way around the 11 odd turns of this WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca. It has been an absolutely dominant drive from Diogo Pinto, and it was on strategy. Let's not forget, Kenneth, they elected to go aggressive, start on the alternates, charge their way to the front, and never look back.
Yeah, they have been really aggressive at the start, but that's what allowed Pinto to gain the gap that he did. And at some point on the road courses, there's a threshold of distance that you can breach to where even if you have a strategy call different from those guys behind you, more often than not, you'll cycle out ahead of them. So despite the overcut strategy for the most part, for Pinto, there was no doubt in sight. A wonderful race, and Pinto just several corners away from his first win this season.
And again, we've been talking about how consistency is going to win this championship. Until the last round, Diogo Pinto hadn't dropped outside of the top 10. What does he do to bounce back? He runs his way into victory lane. Captain Consistent ascends here at the WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca and extends his championship lead, but with 2 more ovals to go, this INDYCAR Buttkicker iRacing Pro Series could go any which way. Fights further behind all the way to the very end. Couple of drivers trying to avoid picking up some extra incident points at the very tail end of this race as well. But Florian Lebigra, Jose Soria will grab points as Phil Kraus is going to lose a couple of points out of the final corner.
I knew it. He was going to go to the inside, turn 11 on Michael Jani for the spot. He was going to give it all that he got, and all of a sudden, he bleeds 2 more. 17th is where Phil Kraus will cross the start-finish line, and that will put him even farther behind in the points gap. He attempted all that he could. He dove it in, just not enough to make the corner as the left front locked up, and that's all she wrote.
I guess the best thing that Phil Krause will be able to tell himself is he's only lost 2 positions as a result of that. Could be 2 very valuable championship points, though, at the very end of the season. Let's, well, take a look at this. Now, both drivers on the alternates. How aggressive is it from Krause? He does come a little bit late, smokes the inside front, and bam, around she goes.
And it all started off of the corkscrew in turn 9. You can gain so much momentum off of that. And then when you make that right-hander turn 10, it's just a setup for 11. He knew he could get the inside. He knew he could make the lunge, but the car just said, I can't do it anymore. And the car just locked up and into the side of Janny he went. I'm sure both of the drivers are frustrated. And I'm sure Krause didn't do that with intention to hit Janny out of the way. But 2 more spots in a series like this where the points are delivered the way they are is a big-time dagger to the American as Diogo Pinto gets to reel in his first win of the season in dominating fashion.
And he won't even celebrate with some burnout, some donuts, you know? He's quite used to being at the very top of the sim racing world, and, well, extends that points advantage with a 6-second advantage at the end of 40 laps of racing. Team Redline 1 and 2 with Florian Lebigra tucked in behind, and then Jose Soria putting it on pole position and then holding on in the early stages to bounce back in the later stages for the Drago Racing team, who will grab 3 drivers inside of the top 6, David Toth and then Michele Costantini splitting Ricardo Rico from his teammates before you get down to Luke McEwen, to Eduardo Leo, Gustavo Ariel and Peter Berryman. For Leo and Gustavo Ariel, slight disappointment I think for them, knowing how important this race might have been. Romanidis down in 11th, finishes outside of the top 10 after qualifying, of course, in 2nd. Sotomuto, Sam Coitert, and then Tamas Shimon and Michael Johnny, the top 15. Jaden Munoz takes advantage to sneak in front of Phil Krause with Javi Rose, Jacob Oster, and Rob Malechka down the back of the field. Word from pit lane is Sam Coitert might already have had some front wing damage that had slowed down that little pack, maybe intensified all the fighting, but 1 lap down and in the wars for the likes of Jussi Katia, Jason Brophy, Brendan Lichtenberg, Adam Crane, and Josh Chin. Before you get to, well, no other way to put it, the used car lot. The Jordan Caruso, Elliot Veyron, Jeff Drake, and Dan Amor. A couple of them tried to stick around, unfortunately finishing very much adrift of the leaders. A look top to bottom at the race results then. And down in victory lane, Diogo Pinto celebrating, standing by with our own Kenneth Bueno. Let's hear from the Portuguese driver.
And it is win number 1 for Diogo Pinto, the points leader going in, the points leader coming out of this race. Diogo, welcome, congratulations. How important is this victory specifically for you in this championship pursuit with the way you did it?
Yeah, it's as important as any other victory, but obviously at this stage of the championship, it's what I needed. I knew that anything other than a win would be really, really bad for me for the last rounds, since they're ovals, obviously. So yeah, I'm happy with the win. I think I should have had pole as well. That would have been 2 extra points, but yeah, it's what I needed.
Only 1 finish outside of the top 10 this season. That was last week at Gateway. So captain consistency continues to do the work over the course of the year. You've got 2 oval races to cap this one off in your chase for the championship. How do you prepare for those 2 and make sure you can stay ahead of those behind in the points?
We've been improving a lot on ovals. We're faster and faster. We're still lacking a lot on just race knowledge and racecraft. So yeah, I think we have a fast car for ovals. We can be in the top 10. So I'll have to perform on race day. I think it's going to be extremely close between me, Philip, and Edo as well. So yeah, we'll try our best, but it's going to be really close, and it's going to come down to the last laps of the last race. That's for sure.
It's a big surge tonight. Still a lot of fighting to go, but this one done in dominating fashion. Diogo, thank you for the time. Congratulations on the win here at Laguna Seca. We'll see you at Milwaukee, the fan vote track, next week.
Thank you. See you.
Diogo Pinto, all the finishes in the top 10 now, 1 win to his tally. We join Florian Lebigra now, who picks up his second place finish of the 2024 season. Florian, welcome. How did the race go for you on strategy? Seemed like a lot of the guys decided to go on the specific alternate tire at the end, some on the primary. What did you make of that strategy here at Laguna Seca and the tire fall off?
And we've seen during the week that basically the soft tires, we could go long with them, even if like it was going to be really hard. So well, we knew like at the beginning there's like a huge tire advantage when you have the soft and the other are on hard, for example. So we just took the risk because we were a bit behind like the 3 first cars, and they were on hard. So we took the risk, and it paid off. We make the gap. I mean, especially Diogo, and then Jose was a bit stuck behind me. I guess because of the dirt here when it was on soft. So yeah, that's why we had to take a risk, especially Diogo because he's fighting for the championship. So well, that was a good goal.
And the last 3 have been a bit of a roller coaster for you. Beneath top 20 finishes at Indy and at Mid-Ohio, but then a top 10 run at Gateway that got you back on track. How meaningful is this second place finish tonight and to be back on the podium?
Well, yeah, it feels pretty good. Yeah, I've been, I wouldn't say unlucky, but I had some bad races in like Indianapolis and Mid-Ohio. So yeah, it's good to be back on the podium, especially good to see Diogo winning because he's fighting for the championship again. So yeah, really happy for the team overall.
Well, I'm sure you guys are all in to help Diogo and your team achieve the most in the end of this championship. Congratulations on the second place. We'll see you at Milwaukee next week.
Thank you very much.
Florian Lebigre clocks in from second place. We join Jose Soria, who joins us from third place on the grid. I'd say this was a great run for you overall. It's been a rough season for you overall, but this one stood out. Fast race car from the jump. And what did you make of this race, and how were you able to keep the pace up over the run?
Thank you. Yes, really happy with the result, to be honest. As you can see, I think I'm currently last in the championship. Maybe not last, but quite close to it. Had a really rough start. I had to do 3 races from outside here. I was in Asia. So I got a different rig every time and only like 20 minutes of practice. Wasn't easy, got crashed out in all of them. And then the other races that I did here weren't great. So it's good to finally get a good result. And yeah, I mean, for me, my race pace wasn't great. I think I was quite lucky in a way to get pole here, because I'm pretty sure if I even started like P2, I would have been stuck in the pack afterwards. So I think I have to give everything to the quali here.
So with the final 2, we've talked to a lot of drivers who are focusing for every single race, points racing-wise. For you, who's got nothing to lose, what do you try and do in these last 2 to get a race win out of it?
Well, I'll definitely put more time into it, for sure, in the ovals. And hopefully we can build a good set. I think we've become one of the best European teams. Obviously, all the American guys are dominating in the ovals, so it's quite hard for us learning from scratch. But hopefully we can put together a good set and fight for the win in the last 2 races.
Well, it was a fantastic one here from Laguna Seca. We were all pleased to watch you running up front, running a really fast race. Congratulations on the third place. We'll see you at Milwaukee 1 week from tonight.
Thank you, and see you guys.
That is Jose Soria from third, Florian Lebigre from second, Diogo Pinto, the race winner, Arjuna from Laguna Seca tonight.
Gotta say, some really good answers from our drivers there, almost like they've had some media training. Points lead, that's where I think Florian Lebigre describes it as a risk. I say calculated risk for Redline to put Pinto onto the alternate tires and to charge. It's given him a 35-point advantage. And Kenneth, don't put me on the spot. Don't ask me to do the quick math. But what I will say is if Diogo Pinto can finish inside of the top 10 in these next 2 rounds, he's putting himself in a very good position and starting to put the pressure onto Phil Kraus.
And he really just needs another great run. It doesn't even need to be a win in some cases, as long as Phil Kraus and Eduardo Leo don't go out punching for the fences at Milwaukee and winning that race. Then Diogo, if he can just settle where he's at, will be in the good enough place to have enough of a buffer to be there at National Super Speedway with the championship. I'd say it's not over yet. Definitely not as tense as it was going into tonight. But these final 2 and the oval races, Arjuna, have shown us that you can never count out anybody, specifically private label Team Hype, as we head into the fan vote track Milwaukee Mile.
America's legendary oval, opened back in 1903 as a dirt track, paved in 1954. There is so much heritage of IndyCar coming here, and it's relatively flat. Going to be quite interesting. You heard it from Jose Soria, Drago Racing, Redline. They've got so much to get to speed with, to learn on these ovals compared to the private label Team Hype. 9.25 degrees of banking. Join us November the 14th. Just 2 races left to go. But we've now closed the book, closed the chapter on the road course rounds in this INDYCAR Buttkicker iRacing Pro Series. Yes, Team Redline have taken their fair share of points, but it all comes down to these final 2 races, to the final 2 ovals to crown our very first INDYCAR Buttkicker iRacing Pro Series champion. On behalf of the team behind the scenes, Kenneth Bueno joining myself, Arjuna Kankipati. Thanks so much for your company. Don't forget, iRacing Black Friday sales. It's your chance to jump in. 50% off new memberships, 25% off renewals for expired and active subscriptions. Never been a better time to jump into iRacing, but we'll see you next week from the Milwaukee Mile.
World of Outlaws Dirt Racing 24 is available now.